I was sitting alone in a dimly lit lounge on my 40th birthday, staring at a cake that no one came to eat with me, wondering how my life had quietly turned into a financial nightmare, with my husband's family cast perfectly as the villains. Turning 40 was supposed to mean something. Not fireworks or dramatic speeches, but at least a sense of arrival. Instead, all I could think about were the faint gray strands near my temples, and how deeply I now appreciated a good night's sleep. Still, I told myself this year would be different. For once, I would celebrate myself properly. So I did what I'd learned to do best over the years. I planned everything myself. 3 weeks of obsessive preparation. Venue scouting across the city, phone calls, emails, layout sketches. I found the place, the Blue Room downtown. Exposed brick walls, amber lighting that softened every face, a live saxophonist whose music made even silence feel expensive. The kind of place where moments mattered. I imagined my husband Daniel walking in with that familiar crooked smile. I imagined him teasing me for overthinking the cake, for caring about fonts and frosting textures. I imagined him raising a glass, saying something heartfelt, reminding everyone why we worked. At 7 p.m., I stood near the entrance in my navy dress, phone in hand, excitement humming beneath my ribs. At 8 p.m., the saxophone slowed. At 9 p.m., the truth settled into my bones like cold water. No friends, no colleagues, no family, and no Daniel. I sat there surrounded by empty chairs, listening to music meant for people who never arrived, feeling the quiet humiliation of being visibly alone in a room built for celebration. The bartender placed a glass of top-shelf bourbon in front of me without asking questions. I cut myself a slice of my own birthday cake and ate it slowly, pretending this wasn't the loneliest moment of my adult life. I didn't know it yet, but that empty party wasn't the worst part. The worst part came a week later, when my phone buzzed during a work meeting and my husband casually demanded $2,100 from me for his father's celebration. That was the moment something inside me broke, and the moment I stopped paying for love that came with invoices attached. My name is Marissa Blake, and when all of this happened, I had just turned 40. I worked in finance, budgeting, forecasting, long-term planning. Numbers made sense to me. Patterns revealed themselves when you stared long enough. Ironically, that skill never seemed to transfer cleanly into my personal life, especially not into my marriage. I met Daniel Morrison 12 years earlier at a friend's engagement party I almost didn't attend. He was charming in a quiet way, attentive without being flashy, warm without being overwhelming. We talked for hours that night about music, travel, and how neither of us liked loud promises. When he asked for my number, it didn't feel dramatic. It felt safe. Our relationship grew slowly, comfortably, the kind of love that doesn't burn hot but settles deep. We married 4 years later in a modest ceremony, surrounded by people who smiled warmly and told us we were solid. I liked that word. Solid sounded dependable, permanent. Daniel's family was larger than life. His father, Harold Morrison, believed every milestone deserved an audience and a budget. His mother, Sandra, had a talent for turning generosity into obligation, with a soft smile and a well-timed sigh. His younger sister, Bethany, floated between passions, boutiques, yoga certifications, creative ventures, each requiring just a little help to get started. His older brother, Michael, struggled more openly, especially with money, but always framed his mistakes as learning experiences the family needed to support. And then there was me, the reliable one, the one with stable income, good credit, and a habit of saying yes before finishing the sentence. At first, it was small things, covering dinner, helping with a deductible, a short-term loan that was definitely temporary. Daniel would always ask gently, always with that look that suggested I was being generous, not obligated. "They're family," he'd say. "And we're doing well," I'd reply. Somewhere along the way, Those two ideas fused into a rule I never formally agreed to, but followed anyway. I didn't resent it at first. I told myself this was what partnership looked like: showing up, helping out, being flexible. Daniel praised me for it. His parents thanked me profusely. Gratitude felt like love when I wasn't paying close attention. What I did notice, but chose to ignore, were the subtle absences. Daniel forgot dates easily. Not maliciously, just passively. Celebrations became optional. Conversations about me were often cut short by conversations about them. My needs were never dismissed outright. They were simply postponed indefinitely. Next month, Daniel would say, after this settles down, once my dad's thing is over. There was always a thing. By the time my 40th birthday approached, I told myself not to expect too much. I wasn't asking for extravagance. I just wanted presence, effort, proof that after 8 years of marriage, I was more than the financial backbone holding everyone else upright. I thought planning the night myself was me being proactive. I didn't realize I was compensating for something that had already been missing for a very long time. Looking back now, the warning signs weren't subtle. They were quiet, persistent, the kind you learn to step around instead of confront because doing so feels easier in the moment. After my birthday came and went in silence, Daniel didn't bring it up right away. No apology, no explanation. Just a vague comment 2 days later while scrolling through his phone on the couch. "Work's been crazy," he said, as if that somehow covered everything. I nodded. I always nodded. Conflict made me uncomfortable, and I'd spent years convincing myself that maturity meant choosing peace over confrontation. What I didn't realize was how often peace came at my expense. The first real crack appeared in the form of that message. I was halfway through a quarterly budget review, one of those meetings where time seemed to stretch in protest, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. Normally, I ignored personal messages during work hours, but something about the timing made my stomach tighten. It was from Daniel. "Hey, we're doing Dad's milestone dinner at Lakeside. $2,100 each. Can you Venmo me by Friday?" No greeting, no context, no acknowledgement of the week before, just a number. I stared at the screen, reading it again, as if repetition might change the meaning. My birthday had passed without so much as a phone call from his parents, not even a polite text. And now, a week later, I was being billed for a celebration that wasn't mine. I excused myself from the meeting, heart pounding, and locked myself in an empty conference room. The message expanded when I opened it, revealing nothing more. No explanation, no softening words, just expectation. The family group chat exploded seconds later. Bethany chimed in first. "Can't wait!" followed by celebratory emojis. Michael added a thumbs up, and all set, everyone was in. No questions asked. I scrolled through the messages, my mind replaying the image of the blue room, the empty tables, the cake I ate alone, the bartender who'd shown me more kindness than my own husband had that night. Something shifted inside me, not loudly, not dramatically, more like a switch being flipped. I realized I wasn't being asked. I was being used. And worse, I had trained them to believe this was normal. Daniel didn't call to talk about it, didn't ask if the amount was okay, didn't mention my birthday at all. The message sat there like an invoice waiting to be paid, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty for not immediately reaching for my wallet. Instead, I felt tired. Tired of being reliable. Tired of being reasonable. Tired of being the person who absorbed everyone else's chaos so smoothly that no one noticed the cost. That was the moment I stopped asking myself how to keep everyone comfortable and started wondering what would happen if I didn't. I sat in that empty conference room longer than necessary, staring at Daniel's message until the screen dimmed. The number, $2,100, felt absurdly specific. Like someone had calculated exactly how much they could take without bothering to explain why. I thought about replying with a question. I thought about calling him. I thought about explaining how hurt I still was. And then I realized something uncomfortable. I'd already explained myself over years, in 100 small ways, through postponed needs, swallowed disappointments, and birthdays quietly downgraded to, "we'll do something later." So instead of typing paragraphs, I opened Venmo. I sent $1. In the note, I wrote, "Congratulations, $1 single dollar." My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. What I felt wasn't anger. It was clarity. Clean, sharp, almost peaceful. I muted the family group chat before the reactions could start. Then I opened my banking app. For years, I'd treated our finances like a shared ecosystem built on trust. What I saw now was an open pipeline, money flowing outward with almost no resistance. I moved carefully, methodically, like someone performing a necessary procedure. First, I removed Daniel as an authorized user on my primary credit card, the one he used for household expenses that somehow included boutique charges and late-night takeout that never seemed to involve me. Next, I canceled the spare card he kept in the kitchen drawer, the emergency card, he'd called it. Apparently, coffee counted as an emergency now. Then I restricted transfers from our joint account. I didn't close it. I simply made sure no money could leave without my direct approval. The process took less than half an hour, but each confirmation felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd loaned out indefinitely. When I finished, I didn't feel victorious. I felt lighter. Before I could second-guess myself, I booked a hotel room downtown. Nothing extravagant, just clean, quiet, anonymous. A place where no one expected anything from me, except a credit card imprint at check-in. I left work early, drove home, and walked into a house that no longer felt like mine. The kitchen was spotless, too spotless. Evidence of a life curated for appearances rather than comfort. I placed my house key gently into the ceramic dish by the door, the one where we always dropped mail and loose change. Then I packed a bag with a few days' worth of clothes and left without slamming the door. The hotel room smelled like fresh linens and neutrality. I ordered room service, a ridiculously overpriced burger and fries, and ate in silence, savoring the strange luxury of not being needed. For the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel heavy. It felt honest. I didn't know it yet, but that single dollar had done more than make a point. It had started a chain reaction Daniel and his family weren't prepared for. The first night in the hotel, I barely slept. Not because I was anxious, but because my mind wouldn't stop replaying moments I'd dismissed for years. Conversations I'd brushed off. Feelings I'd minimized. It was as if distance had finally given me permission to see my own life clearly. By the second morning, the shock had softened into something heavier. Awareness. I sat on the edge of the bed with a cup of lukewarm coffee, staring out the window at a city that seemed completely indifferent to my internal reckoning. Cars moved, people hurried, life continued. And yet, everything inside me felt fundamentally rearranged. I checked my phone. Missed calls from Daniel. Texts ranging from confused to irritated. "Why did you do that? This isn't funny, Marissa. You embarrassed me." Not once did he ask if I was okay. Not once did he mention my birthday. Later that day at work, I tried to focus, but my concentration fractured easily. I caught myself staring at spreadsheets without reading them, my chest tightening every time my phone buzzed. When 2 police officers walked into the office that afternoon, my heart stopped entirely. They were professional, calm, concerned. "Welfare check," one of them said gently. "Your husband reported you missing." Missing. The word echoed absurdly in my head. I wasn't missing. I was sitting at my desk, doing my job, breathing normally. The officers listened as I explained, briefly, carefully, that I'd taken space, that I was safe, that I needed distance from financial pressure disguised as family obligation. One of them warned me quietly that continued silence could escalate things. More reports. Claims I didn't want attached to my name. That night, back in the house while Daniel was out, I did something I'd avoided for years. I pulled out records, receipts, transfers, statements, notes I'd kept out of habit, not suspicion. I spread everything across the kitchen table, my hands moving automatically while my chest tightened with each page. Roof repairs, business loans, temporary help, emergency funds that never returned. By midnight, the pattern was undeniable. The money always moved one way, the gratitude always faded quickly, and I was always expected to say yes again. The worst part wasn't the total. It was realizing how little protest it had taken for my boundaries to be ignored. I sat there alone, surrounded by proof of my own erasure, and asked myself a question that should have come years earlier. When did I stop being a wife and start being a resource? I didn't cry. I wrote a single sentence on a sticky note and pressed it to my laptop screen. I will not fund disrespect. That wasn't revenge. It wasn't anger. It was survival. And for the first time since my 40th birthday, I felt steady enough to face whatever came next. Clarity has a way of provoking chaos. 2 days after the police visit, the calm I'd carefully built cracked open. It started quietly, with a call from building security at my office. "Ms. Blake, you have visitors in the lobby. They're persistent." I already knew. When the elevator doors opened, the noise hit first. Sandra's voice, sharp, rehearsed, carrying across marble like she was addressing an audience. Daniel stood between her and Bethany, jaw clenched, eyes already hard with accusation. "Why are you doing this?" Daniel demanded the moment he saw me. "You froze the cards." Sandra stepped forward, her expression a practiced blend of disbelief and moral outrage. "Harold's milestone is this weekend. He deserves it." That word, deserves, landed like a slap. I thought of my empty birthday, the cake I cut alone, the silence that followed. I kept my voice level. "Email my lawyer," I said. "We're not doing this here." The lobby went quiet. For the first time, no one knew what to say. The escalation didn't stop there. Messages poured in, friends of the family asking if everything was okay, subtle warnings about how I was overreacting, reminders that money isn't everything. When guilt failed, blame took its place. When blame failed, bargaining began. Bethany offered to work something out with leftover boutique inventory. Daniel insisted this was temporary, that I was being dramatic, that marriage meant sacrifice. I listened without responding, forwarding everything to my attorney. Then the assets started moving. A listing appeared online for Harold and Sandra's weekend cabin. A vintage motorcycle, Harold's pride, showed up for sale at half its value. The urgency I'd never seen before suddenly materialized when the money pipeline closed. It was proof of something I'd suspected all along. They could find the money. They just never needed to, until now. Daniel tried one last time, late at night, voice softer than before. "Can't we just talk, without lawyers?" "We've been talking for years," I said. "You just weren't listening." Silence followed. The escalation wasn't loud anymore. It was structural, legal, final. Every attempt to pull me back into the old role only confirmed that leaving it had been necessary. I wasn't punishing them. I was refusing to disappear for their comfort. And that, I realized, was what they couldn't forgive. The storm eventually passed, not because anything was resolved, but because everyone grew tired of yelling. That's how I found myself alone again, sitting on the edge of a hotel bed at 2 a.m, staring at the ceiling while the city hummed outside like it didn't care whether I existed or not. The adrenaline was gone. The anger had burned itself out. What remained was something far more dangerous: emptiness. I replayed everything in my head, not as arguments or accusations, but as memories stripped of excuses. The way Daniel would sigh when I brought up finances, as if my concern was an inconvenience. The way his parents' gratitude always expired the moment the next emergency arrived. The way I'd learned to smile through disappointment, because causing discomfort felt worse than enduring it. That night, the doubts came fast and merciless. What if I really was being selfish? What if this was just how marriage worked? What if I'd thrown everything away over money? The questions stacked up until my chest felt tight, my breath shallow. I pressed my palm against my sternum, grounding myself in the physical sensation of being alive. I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't unstable. I was exhausted. I thought about my birthday again. Not the party, but the moment I walked back to my car alone. The way my reflection in the parking garage mirror had looked smaller somehow, less certain, like someone who'd learned to disappear quietly. That version of me terrified me more than divorce ever could. I checked my phone one last time before sleep. No messages from Daniel, no apology. Just silence. The same silence that had followed my birthday, now wearing a different disguise. I realized then that this was the lowest point. Not the confrontation, not the money. This quiet space where I had to sit with the truth that the person I'd built my life around might never see me as anything more than useful. Tears finally came. Not dramatic sobs, but slow, steady ones that soaked into the pillow while I stared at the dark. I let them. I didn't rush them. I didn't apologize to myself for feeling them, because beneath the grief, something else was forming. Resolve. I didn't know how this would end yet. I didn't know what I would lose before it was over. But I knew one thing with terrifying certainty. I could not go back to being invisible. And once that truth settled in, sleep finally came. Not as escape, but as preparation. The morning after that long, hollow night, I woke up without the familiar knot in my chest. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't relief. It was something steadier. Acceptance. I dressed slowly, deliberately, as if each movement mattered. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was choosing. When I arrived at my attorney's office later that morning, the stack of documents waiting for me felt less like a burden and more like evidence. Proof that my instincts hadn't been wrong. She slid a summary sheet across the desk. 5 years. $97,300. Seeing the number written plainly did something to me. It stripped away every lingering doubt. This wasn't generosity. It wasn't partnership. It was extraction. As we reviewed the breakdown, roof repairs, business ventures, temporary bailouts, I felt strangely calm. The facts spoke louder than any argument ever could. When Daniel called later that afternoon, I put him on speaker. "You're really doing this," he said, voice tight. "You're choosing money over family." "No," I replied evenly. "I'm choosing myself." There was a pause. Then defensiveness, accusations, emotional appeals. He spoke about loyalty, about sacrifice, about how I could afford to help. He never spoke about showing up. He never mentioned my birthday. That was the moment I understood something fundamental. If love required me to disappear, it wasn't love. The turning point didn't come with a dramatic gesture or a public victory. It came with a quiet realization that I didn't need validation from people who benefited from my silence. I authorized the demand letter. I set boundaries in writing. And I stopped explaining myself. Later that week, Daniel's father approached me unexpectedly at a bowling alley. He apologized, not fully, not perfectly, but sincerely enough to confirm what I'd already learned. They'd noticed my absence. They just hadn't cared until it cost them something. As I walked out into the night air, I felt lighter. Not because everything was resolved, but because I finally understood my own worth. The power had shifted. Not through revenge, not through cruelty, but through clarity. Consequences don't always arrive with noise. Sometimes they unfold quietly, asset by asset, apology by apology, relationship by relationship, until the damage becomes undeniable. The first sign that everything had truly changed came through silence. The family group chat, once buzzing with entitlement and expectation, went dark. No more emojis, no more casual requests disguised as updates. When money disappeared, so did the conversation. Then the sales began. Harold and Sandra listed their weekend cabin. A place they'd hosted gatherings for years, suddenly reduced to a digital listing with poorly lit photos and a price far below its worth. Harold's vintage motorcycle, his pride, was sold quietly, without ceremony. Bethany's boutique inventory appeared online in bulk lots, discounted and desperate. No one announced these sacrifices. No one acknowledged why they were happening, but I noticed. Daniel tried to hold on to dignity as things unraveled. He told friends I'd changed, that I'd become cold, difficult, focused on money. Some believed him at first, but narratives crack under pressure, and the truth has a way of leaking through. People started asking questions. Why was his family selling assets? Why had I moved out? Why were lawyers involved? I didn't answer publicly. I didn't need to. The facts were enough. Eventually, Daniel's voice softened. His messages lost their edge. He asked if we could reset, if this was really worth losing a marriage over. I listened, but something inside me had already moved on, because reset implied returning to a version of myself I no longer recognized. His parents distanced themselves, not out of remorse, but embarrassment. Bethany stopped reaching out altogether. Michael sent a single message that said, "I get it now." It was too late, but it was honest. I didn't celebrate their discomfort. I didn't gloat. I simply stepped aside and let reality do what it does best when it's no longer being subsidized. The finality came not with a fight, but with paperwork. Signed documents, clear terms, quiet goodbyes. When I left the hotel for the last time, it wasn't to return to my marriage. It was to reclaim my life. I walked away without shouting, without revenge, without spectacle. And somehow, that felt like the most powerful ending of all. 40 didn't arrive the way I thought it would. There was no celebration redo, no dramatic apology tour, no moment where everything suddenly made sense and fell back into place. What came instead was something quieter and far more lasting: peace. I moved into a small apartment not far from my office, nothing extravagant, just clean lines, morning light through the windows, and the kind of silence that feels like permission rather than punishment. I bought furniture slowly, intentionally. Each piece chosen because I liked it, not because it fit someone else's expectations. For the first time in years, my bank account reflected my life. No emergency transfers, no guilt-driven decisions, no quiet resentment layered under every act of generosity. I paid my own bills, funded my own joys, and slept without the constant low-grade anxiety of being needed for the wrong reasons. Daniel and I didn't end things with fireworks. We ended them with understanding, on my side at least. He never fully grasped why I couldn't keep giving, and I finally understood that I didn't need him to, because love doesn't arrive with invoices. It doesn't keep score while pretending not to. It doesn't disappear when you stop paying. Real love shows up, even when it's inconvenient. That birthday cake I ate alone? I think about it sometimes. Not with bitterness, but with gratitude. It was the moment I stopped confusing endurance with loyalty and generosity with obligation. The lesson was simple, but hard-earned. Boundaries don't ruin relationships. They reveal which ones were real. Turning 40 didn't make me old. It made me free. And for the first time in my life, that freedom felt like something worth celebrating, even if the guest list was finally just me.